Level 1 Spam has consistently been a deck with a small but devoted fan base using cards like Mystic Piper and Number 78, but has lacked an official archetype face in a sense. Some thought that Spirals may become the face of the deck, largely due to Quick Fix, at least before Spiral's newest support for Maximum Crisis pulled the deck in a different direction in most people's eyes. However, Maximum Crisis did introduce Lyrilusc. Seriously, Konami, why the name change? From the anime, bringing with it some nice level 1 monsters and a key boss rank 1 monster, giving Lyrilusc the chance to be the level 1 spam face, so to speak. So let's see what happens when level 1 spam joins forces with Lyrilusc. Starting with the new archetype, the first thing is that all 3 main deck monsters have a hard once per turn limit on their effects. Turquoise Wabler is a solid card, but the efficiency of its effect suffers from 2 problems. First, the lack of main deck Lyrilusc monsters limits the applicability of the effect from the hand. Second, the resiliency of Assembled limits the applicability of the effect after the first turn, i.e. Assembled is probably going to stay on the field for multiple turns, maybe not doing much damage, but staying on the field. Furthermore, the fact that Wabler has to be special summoned from the hand to receive its summons effect removes the ability to use a card like 1-for-1 or Swallow's Nest. However, despite all of these problems, it is still good enough to run at 3 copies. Sapphire Swallow is the key card for getting any quality assembled on the field. For a good amount of the time, its combined effect will net 3 XZ materials: itself, the other winged beast from the hand, and 1 Lyrilusc from the graveyard. Sapphire is definitely a 3-copy card. Also, it is important to note that Swallow's summons effect can trigger Wabler's effect, giving it even more utility. While Sapphire is the key card to get a quality assembled on the field in the first place, Cobalt Sparrow is the key card for actually keeping that assembled on the field and allowing it to do something, due to its no targeting effect for an XZ monster that it's a material for. In addition to the very nice no targeting effect, the ability to search another level 1 winged beast when special summoned is definitely useful. 3 copies. Independent Nightingale is one of those cards that looks good on paper and provides another possible victory condition, and, at least from my perspective, thankfully got Tyrant Neptune banned, because that card was just poorly designed. But without Neptune, the victory condition provided for by Independent Nightingale is rather inferior to Assembled. Most of the time, Nightingale will largely be summoned off of an instant fusion to provide a free winged beast monster to set up Swallows from the hand effect, to be XZ material, and pop a free 500 damage. So to this point, I run 1 copy. Assembled Nightingale is the easiest win condition for this deck, especially when Sparrow is a part of the material. With Sparrow on board, Assembled is frequently a 3200 to 5000 damage dealer that commonly cannot be targeted or destroyed, putting the opponent on the clock, so to speak. Of course, it is certainly viable that Assembled will just flat out OTK the opponent when boosted by an attack augmenter. 3 copies. Sadly, Maximum Crisis did not see the release of Recite Starling, which can be largely viewed as the Force Strix for the deck, in addition to having a nifty attack increase ability that heavily increases the ability of Assembled to OTK. Moving on to the other monster choices I run, not surprisingly, it is important to have monsters that can innately special summon themselves to maximize the material complement of Assembled. To this end, I run the obvious 3 copies of Jester Confit and 3 copies of Turbo Booster, because you will be using your normal summons during the turn, triggering its ability to special summon itself. Obviously, this deck needs some draw power, and there are 2 solid choices, Mystic Piper and Cyber Valley. Both cards are useful for the draw power and the ability to set up Wabler from the hand due to their own field clearance. They share the same disadvantage of commonly having to be normal summoned over being special summoned. The chief advantage of Mystic Piper over Cyber Valley is the possibility of netting a +1 off the draw, whereas the chief advantages of Cyber Valley are it does not have a once per turn limit, and it can be used as a rudimentary attack negator if you drew poorly. Overall, Mystic Piper is probably the better choice if one is not running machine duplication. Obviously, if you choose to go a more machine winged beast type of level 1 hybrid route and run machine duplication, then Cyber Valley is the choice. I also run one copy of Glow Up Bulb, which is one of those cards that's nice, but will be better with Starling due to its Graveyard Recursion effect. However, at the moment, that Graveyard Recursion can spell the difference between ending the duel on the current turn or waiting until the next turn. Finally, closing out the monsters, I run 3 copies of DD Crow to help support Swallow's Search effect, and it can be a general nuisance to the opponent, and 2 copies of Snowbell for its innate special summoning ability. For having only wind monsters and at least 2 of them on the field really is not difficult with this deck. I don't run Battle Faders or Jack Frost because my interpretation of this deck is that the longer the duel goes before Assembled hits the field, the lower the probability that you win, and because both Fader and Jack Frost have 1-turn waits, which gives your opponent more time to set up their field to defend against Assembled and its summons. Furthermore, this deck without Starling is rather glass cannon-like, for a 3 material or less Assembled is not going to carry the day in any respects against a decent opposing deck. So I view Fader and Frost as basically a wasted card in hand most of the time. Evil Thorn is a possibility, but not consistent enough for my taste, and the lack of synergy it has with the other monsters in this deck. When Starling is released, Evil Thorn becomes a more interesting choice, but right now, no way. There is the Pendulum strategy option of pairing Pendulum Mucho and Abyss Actor Extra together, but again, without Starling, the delay associated with having to set up the Pendulum scale and the general lack of Pendulum monsters creates delays and lower winning percentages. While Luscinia is definitely a possibility, largely to make 7 sins, because really why else would you run it, for its special summoning capacity is not strong in this deck, it is also another card that slows the duel down, for remember, when Luscinia uses its extra deck summons effect, the opponent can no longer take battle damage, meaning that you will have to wait a turn before ending the duel with Assembled, and summoning Assembled on the turn you summon 7 sins will basically waste a material protecting it during the opponent's next turn. So, with that said, I'm not a fan of Luscinia in this deck, for 7 sins really is not that difficult to get off the field early in the duel when the opponent still has most of his or her resources available, and late in the duel it's just too inconsistent. For the spells, I run the super obvious Where Art Thou as a free search for any monster in the deck. Thanks to the efforts associated with Assembled, the 2,000 cost is rather immaterial as a threat. 3 copies. Again, not surprisingly, 3 copies of Instant Fusion for summoning Independent or Thousand Eyes Restrict. Thousand Eyes is useful as a form of interrupter breaker against opponent monsters that could stop your plays. I like 1 copy of Mimiclay, due to all of the special summoning in this deck, allowing another means to get an easy extra monster on the field. 1 copy of Foolish Burial to dump the target for Sparrow's XZ material effect, basically adding that card from the graveyard to the XZ, or Glow Up Bulb summons effect. I run 1 copy of 1-for-1 simply for the versatility it provides through Glow Up Bulb, Cobalt, or Mystic Piper summoning, among other things. I run 3 copies of Overly Regen as a simple means of adding an extra 200 attack point and an extra attack to Assembled. Regen is a nice psychological card because some opponents will not activate a Solemn Strike or some other negator when you're making a 2 or 3 material Assembled, because they may feel you're baiting them into using that negation, and then 2 copies of Regen can make that Assembled much more menacing. I run 1 copy of Soul Charge for somewhat obvious reasons, although the life point costs associated with Art Thou and Soul Charge can get a bit pricey, and the loss of the battle phase does equal a 1-turn wait. Finally, let's talk about attack augmentation for OTK purposes because Starling is not available. I imagine that the sexy tech choice for this deck for most people is Stoic Challenge because of the rather ridiculous attack increase that the card can provide to a 4 or 5 materials Assembled. Overall, I'm not sold on Challenge because of those last 2 sentences in the effect. First, Stoic Challenge destroys itself during the opponent's next end phase. Second, when Challenge leaves the field, the equipped monster is destroyed. This effect provides more opponent versatility in addressing the threat. For example, my opponent may not have a Solemn to stop Assembled summons, but may have a Cosmic Cyclone or MST to remove it after Challenge is equipped. Another possibility is an opponent's Trident or Masterpiece, which would be unable to hit a Sparrow backed assembled, and it would be difficult to hit just one part of future XZ material, but can easily destroy it via Challenge's effect. Now, on its face, this effect may not mean as much as I've stated, because obviously assembled can protect itself from destruction. But that protection does come at a significant cost. Dropping a 4 material assembled to a 3 material because the opponent MST to challenge is meaningful, because now instead of doing 3200 total damage, if your assembled had never been equipped with challenge to begin with, your assembled maxes out at 1800 damage. Also, challenge does not have any meaningful utility over some of the other equip options because it requires assembled to have at least 4 materials to OTK. If it could OTK with only 3, then challenge may be a meaningful option, but that is not the case. So instead of challenge, I prefer to run 3 copies of Psychic Blade, which only has a life point cost if it gets destroyed, and actually has more utility than challenge, because a 3 material assembled will have 2600 attack and do 7800 damage, which puts the OTK in striking range if you instant fusioned an independent and used its burn effect, versus challenge that still comes up 300 life points short of 8000 in the same situation. Incidentally though, when Starling comes out, I might switch from Psychic Blade to United We Stand. My remaining extra deck is a little all over the place in some sense, with a good portion of it centering around getting Armory Arm on the field as another means to support assembled. 1 copy of Thousand Eyes Restrict, 1 copy of Dragoness the Wicked Knight. This is a kind of an oddball choice, but it is a level 3 wind that can pair with a level 1 tuner for Armory Arm, 1 copy of the aforementioned Armory Arm, 1 Herald of the Arclight, 1 Tatsunoko, 1 Sylvan Princesssprite, 1 Ghostrick Dullahan, 2 copies of Slacker Magician, 1 copy of number F0 Utopic Future, and 1 copy of number 39 Utopic Roots. Overall, there is a decent skeleton for this deck, with level 1 spam finally having a cohesive archetype form. However, there is a glass cannon feel to the deck, because a control version of the deck seems rather weak, due to all of the interruption in the game right now, and the lack of power in the main deck monsters. So, at the moment, the best strategy seems to be playing an all-or-nothing type of strategy, meaning winning or losing will largely swing on what back row the opponent has available, most notably Solemn cards. While the deck has some pop to it, right now without Starling, it's like a bird trying to fly with a broken wing. Can it fly? Sure. Can it fly well? Sort of. When Starling comes out, the deck will definitely have a lot more bite to compete against the meta, although dodging those multiple interruption fields will still be the big issue and be rather annoying. However, right now, this deck is probably casual at best, simply due to the glass cannon aspect. Well, that's my Lyrilusc deck. Thank you for your attention and your time. I'm out.